Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk to you for a minute about something that I think could be really powerful as you start the fall semester this next school year. I know it may be a little early to start thinking about this, but I really feel like this is something that could make a big difference. So, I want to talk to you about how you can use differentiation to help really combat some of the things that are going to happen with our students, K-12 students, as a result of COVID-19 school closures. Oh, I forgot to tell you who I am. My name is Kelly. I'm a professor at GVSU, and my work is in differentiation. So we're going to talk a minute about what differentiation is. It's a term that's thrown around a lot, but what really is it? And then I want to talk to you about why it could matter more than ever for you this fall, how it could be a real game changer, especially when used really intentionally. So let's talk for a minute about what differentiation is not. Differentiation is not meant to be something extra. Teachers have enough to do. This is not meant to be something extra. If used really intentionally, I actually think it could cause the teacher to have less work to do. So it's also not spontaneous. It's something that's planned for and intentional, and it's not something that's just spontaneously done on the fly in the middle of a lesson. Differentiation is not individualization, and what I mean by that is it's not developing 25 different lesson plans for the 25 students in your classroom. It is based on the needs of the individual, but you're going to use those powerfully for grouping strategies and lesson planning for whole group or stations, some of the things we're going to talk about in a minute, but it's not meant to be 25 different lesson plans. And it's differentiation is definitely not more for some students and less for others. We want to make sure that the tasks that we give students are respectful, and giving some students more and others less is not respectful. So then, if those are the things differentiation is not, what is differentiation? Well, it's a really systematic approach where you're paying attention to student readiness, where students are in relationship to the targets or standards, and you're constantly aware of that. And you're also aware of student interests. We know that we can get students to learn better if we are engaging them in areas that they're interested in. So we should always use that to leverage student learning whenever we can. Differentiation is also when we use flexible approaches. So flexibility is a key to differentiation. We're going to use the space we have in our classroom. We're going to use the time allotted to us with our students, our materials, grouping, instruction, all those things we're going to use flexible approaches to. They're going to change from minute to minute, day to day, hour to hour, because we are going to use them to the highest power that we can, right? So they're going to have to change and be flexible based on what our students need and what we as teachers need in order to provide the instruction that we know is best. Differentiation is based on the same standards and targets. So you're not changing the things the students are learning. You're not changing your standards. You're not changing your targets. We're just changing maybe the process or the product, or in just a second we'll talk a little bit more about this, but I just want you to know that differentiation is based on the same standards or targets. It just might be a different approach to get there. And differentiation allows for student voice and choice. We want our students, just like I was talking to you a minute ago about interests, we want students to have a voice in their education, and we want them to have some choice as often as possible. So students can often help us understand how they learn best. if we give them these options to have voice and choice in our classrooms. So differentiation can be on content, process, or product. So it could be on the content of our lesson. And we're using the same standards and targets, but we may be chunking it into smaller chunks or larger chunks. We may the content of the lesson may be differentiated for that group of students. We might differentiate the process, the way that students are learning the material, and we might differentiate how they show us what they've learned in their products. So now that we've kind of talked about what differentiation is and what differentiation isn't, I want to try to show you that if you differentiate with purpose, this could be the key to your student success this fall. We know that students are going to come to us with varied levels of learning from this time out of the classroom. Some students will have very little learning between the time they left the classroom in March and the time they see us again in August. So we want to make sure that those students get what they need. And we also are going to have students that have done some things and that have had maybe parent educators or people at home that could help them, the resources that they needed, food to eat. So if you're really hungry and you don't have things at home that you need, if you think back to Maslow's needs, if you haven't had your basic needs met, you're not going to be able to learn very efficiently. So we know some students are going to come to us in August very, very undernourished educationally since March. And some will come and they will have done things. And guess what, guys? All of these students are going to be in our same classroom. So we've always dealt with this. Educators have always dealt with this really different and varied group of students. But I'm thinking that in August, it's going to be even more pronounced than usual. You're going to have more variation. So because of that, we should just go ahead and acknowledge it and plan for it. And we should plan to differentiate with purpose. So I'm going to show you some ways I think you could do that. So I think you're going to need to do some really intentional formative assessment. Planned formative assessment where you're really thoughtful about gathering information about your students. We're going to have to figure out where they're at. We're going to have to figure out where they're at in every subject, in every area. So what they remember from March and what they maybe learned between then and now. So we're going to have to do some formative assessment with them. We're going to have to use that data to plan our instruction. We're going to have to use some, I think it would be smart anyway, to use some grouping strategies. To use partners, small groups, to use flexible grouping, so these groups change, just whenever they need to based on the data. And also, I think this is a really good time, if you haven't already, to start station teaching. So station teaching can be a really efficient way to organize your class time. I have seen this be very powerful, even in 12th grade math classrooms. So I believe station teaching can be powerful from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. So if you think of almost like centers where you've got maybe 4 different areas in your classroom where students are doing 4 different activities and they're rotating through, and the teacher is generally at one of them and having small group instruction with students. And generally, that station changes with each group. So as different students come to the teacher's station, they're doing different activities than the group prior to them or the group that follows them, because it's very specific based on that group's learning needs. And at other stations, they may be doing some spiraling back into prior learning. They may be doing a hands-on activity. If you have access to technology, they may be using technology. Maybe they're doing Osmos. It just depends what you have access to. It looks really different. I've seen students build models with Legos at a station. I mean, you can have really some cool stuff going on at the other stations too, but you want to plan it to be really intentional, especially in your grouping of the students. And remember that that grouping should be flexible and based on really as current data as you can get. So as soon as students have those targets, we want to be moving them on. So anyway, if you haven't done station teaching, you should really look into that, because I think it could be a powerful way to implement teaching and instruction this fall. So let's talk about formative assessment. How are we going to figure out what they know? Really good teachers are constantly aware of where their students are in relation to their targets. How far are they from mastery? Have they already mastered them? They're always trying to assess where students are in relation to their targets. So one way you can do that is by using entrance or exit tickets. You can get really creative. These can look lots of different ways. You could use these every day with students and they'd be varied, so it's not boring to students. You could have students send a tweet about some information that you learned in class, and then you could look at those tweets to determine their learning. You could have students give you 2 things that they learned today and 1 thing that confused them. You could ask students to draw a picture of how they felt after their learning today, and then, write a sentence explaining what their aha moment was, or something that surprised them that they learned. So you can, it could be math problems. It could be, 1 or 2 math problems that they do at the end of the day that just show you where they are, how they learned, how much mastery they have of what you taught that period or that day. So entrance and exit tickets, lots of ways to use those. You also could get at some metacognition. You could intentionally ask them metacognitive questions. So I've seen teachers use this pretty effectively. Lately, I've seen it a lot on summative assessments in math, where they have students explain their thinking, and it's more than just showing their work. They're also explaining why they did it that way. And that's fine and good, but I think that there's real value in asking metacognitive questions in a formative way too, because we can start to understand student thinking. And I think it may be worth having one-on-one or two-on-one conversations with students this fall, where you ask them metacognitive questions to find out, to really figure out where they're at. I mean, I know it is so hard to do that with students, especially when you have so many students. But I think it really might be worth the time and effort to have conversations with kids, to plan your class periods the first couple of weeks, where you're able to just have one-on-one conversations with students and kind of get at what they're thinking. Maybe you could do that with some of the standards from the previous year. Some of the major ideas, the big ideas from the grade that they just came from, you could kind of get at some metacognitive questions related to that. We also can use think, pair, share. Hopefully you guys have used that before, but that's just where you give students time to think about their response first. That's really important. We know that we do not give students enough time to think. We don't give them enough think time in class. Probably mostly because we don't have a lot of time, but anyway, it's intentionally giving time to think, and then they have a pair that they pair with, and then they share. So this is a really good way to formatively assess students. You can also use things like carousel brainstorming, where you put students in groups, and maybe you give them a big piece of paper or a small piece of paper, and you're having them brainstorm or think together about an idea, and you're walking around the room and looking at what they're putting on the paper. So you're assessing and seeing what their learning is and what their thinking is. So I wanted to go over a few very specific ways to formatively assess. Please use these, modify them, change them to be about your subject area or your grade level, but these are just a few kickoff ideas that I've seen be pretty effective at getting at student thinking. So you can use pre-assessments, maybe anticipatory guides. So this is an example of one where students, before you teach, are going to write either agree or or disagree on the left, and then after you teach it, they may reassess and decide whether they agree or disagree now on different statements or information. So like number 1 says fungi must form spores to reproduce. And then students have to support that. So you're getting at some of that metacognition. Like, what are they thinking? So you could do some sort of, there's lots of ways to pre-assess students. So I think this may be one of the things that you do more of than you have done in the past. You may do more pre-assessing and finding out what students already know about the topic. And you could just have them write to do that. You could have them draw pictures to do that. You could have them, any of those things we've already talked about, to pre-assess and find out before I start, what do students know about this topic? What do they remember from previous years? I love Bump in the Road. So this is, the reason I love Bump in the Road is because it assumes that every student has something in the lesson that they found confusing or difficult. So this is an example of a way we can teach students kind of that growth mindset, and that it's okay not to understand something. It's okay for something to be confusing. And as a matter of fact, we expect that. We expect that something was tricky for you. So what I want you to do at the end of class is to write down something that you found confusing or difficult today, something that was a bump in the road for you. And then the teacher is going to collect those responses and go through them and use them to help decide instruction for tomorrow. Or they're going to form small groups right then and ask them to share their bumps and to seek clarification from their group, their small group. You can also use graphic organizers or learning logs to help students organize their thinking. So like, this is just an example of one. You could do lots of different ways, but what I already knew, some new words or new vocabulary I learned, what did I find important to remember, some sort of chart or picture, and what did it remind you of? So have them start to access that prior learning. And then, I'm not so sure about this. So you could use this type of organizer for students to kind of capture their learning. And also this might be something good to give them to fill out while you're teaching. Some students can really process information better if they're doing something like this. So you have to remember that formative assessment data has to be used for instruction. If you don't use it, there's no point in doing it. Don't give a pre-assessment if you're not going to use the information. Don't have students fill out exit tickets if you're not going to use it. You should be using it for the next day's or the next period's instruction. So you can use it to form groups. You can use it to help decide what your stations are going to be, like the actual materials that are going to be in the stations could be determined based on what the students misunderstood or what misconceptions were out there. Things that need to be spiraled back through. And I want to wish you good luck. I know this is going to be a really challenging school year, but remember to reach out to other educators. One thing I've already noticed is on Twitter and Instagram and websites, like so many educators are sharing ideas. So many people that do professional development are sharing for free their knowledge, and I know there's a lot out there and it's very overwhelming, but just try to take it in small bites and make sure you reach out. Like, reach out, email me, let me know, hey, this is happening and I'm so lost, or somebody down the hall, or somebody in the next district over. We're all here to help each other. The one thing that we have going for us as educators is we all love our students. We all want the best for our students. There's no competitiveness in this game. We all want the best for them. So if you need help or you feel overwhelmed as this starts, if you planned some brilliant lesson and it didn't work and you don't understand why, first of all, just give yourself a pat on the back because you deserve lots of love. And then just let's just have conversations about it and work it out. So make sure you reach out. I wish you the best of luck. I know it's going to be quite a challenge, but you are up for the challenge because educators are amazing. So good luck.